They accepted casualties that would break any other species. The Scourge hive loomed ahead like a dark moon. It was massive beyond comprehension, built from the organic remains of countless worlds. Biological structures and mechanical systems merged together in ways that hurt to look at. This was where the Scourge had been born. This was their heart. Captain Han Doyen stared at it through the Indomitable's forward viewport. His ship was battered and burning. Half his crew was dead or wounded. But they had made it this far. They were not stopping now. Range to hive, he asked. 15,000 kilometers and closing, reported the tactical officer. They are throwing everything at us. Fighters, capital ships, biological weapons. I count at least 600 separate contacts. Only 600? Doyen said. They must be running low. Someone laughed. It was a tired, desperate sound. They had been fighting for 30 hours without rest. Human bodies could endure incredible stress, but there were limits. Everyone on the bridge was running on stimulants and sheer willpower. Dr. Nari, Doyen said. It is time. In her laboratory, Dr. Kim Nari input the final launch codes. Missiles streaked away from the Indomitable and a dozen other ships. They were not explosive warheads. They were biological delivery systems, each one packed with the weaponized Earth organisms she had created. Missiles away, she reported. Her hands were shaking. She was about to commit genocide. Yes, it was against a species that had killed trillions. Yes, it was in defense of innocent lives, but it was still genocide. May whatever gods exist forgive me, she whispered. The missiles penetrated the hive's outer defenses. Scourge weapons destroyed some of them, but not all. Not nearly all. When they detonated, they released clouds of microscopic organisms into the hive's atmosphere. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Scourge fighters kept attacking. The capital ships kept firing. The hive continued to function normally. Then the infections began. The Earth organisms found the Scourge tissue and began to feed. They reproduced at incredible rates, doubling every few minutes. They spread through the biological systems of the hive like wildfire. The Scourge had built their entire civilization around consuming other life. They had never considered that life might consume them. Thexler felt the hive dying around it. Entire sections were going dark as the infection spread. The neural pathways were shutting down. The biological organs were dissolving. It sent desperate commands to purge the infected areas. But the contamination was spreading too fast. How was this possible? The Scourge had immunity to thousands of known pathogens. Their biology was adaptive and resilient. Yet these microscopic invaders were destroying them with ease. Thexlar accessed the data its scientists had gathered about the humans. They came from a planet designated as Class 12 Deathworld, the highest possible rating. A world where life fought constantly just to survive, where evolution was driven by competition and violence. Thexlar understood now. The Scourge had evolved to consume weak prey. The humans had evolved to survive against everything. When prey met predator, the outcome should have been obvious. All forces, Thexlar broadcast. Protect the hive at all costs. The humans must not reach the core. But the human fleet was already too close. Lieutenant Cho Minho flew his Viper through a storm of weapons fire. He was down to his last ammunition clip. His shields were gone. One of his engines was failing, but he kept flying. Dragon Lead, this is Dragon 7, came a voice over the radio. I am hit bad. Engines are offline. I'm going in. Minho checked his display. Dragon 7 was Private Lee Yunji, a pilot who had joined the fleet straight out of training. She was 19 years old. Dragon 7, eject, Minho ordered. We will pick you up after the battle. Negative, Lead, Yunji replied. Her voice was calm, too calm. Ejection system is damaged, but I still have maneuvering thrusters, and I am heading right toward a cluster of Scourge ships. Minho understood what she was planning. Yunji, do not— It has been an honor, sir, she said. Tell my parents I did my duty. Her Viper accelerated on its remaining thrusters, aiming directly at a Scourge capital ship. The aliens tried to shoot her down, but she was too small and moving too erratically. She struck the capital ship's bridge at high speed. The explosion was small compared to the size of the ship, but it was enough. The capital ship began to list, its command systems destroyed. Secondary explosions rippled through its structure. Within minutes, the entire vessel was breaking apart. Dragon 7 confirmed down, Minho said into the radio. His voice was flat, empty. She took a capital ship with her. There was silence on the squadron channel. Then someone said, So, for Yunji, For Yunji, they all repeated. The battle intensified. The Scourge were fighting with desperate fury now, knowing their hive was dying. They rammed human ships. They fired weapons that damaged themselves as much as the enemy. They accepted horrific casualties just to slow the human advance. But humans understood desperate last stands. They had been making them for thousands of years. From Thermopylae to the Alamo to the last stand on Mars, humanity knew how to fight when there was no hope left. "Captain," shouted the tactical officer on the Indomitable, "the hive is charging some kind of weapon. It is pulling power from every system. Whatever it is big." Doyen pulled up the sensor readings. The hive's core was glowing with energy. Readings showed it was bending space-time itself. This was not just a weapon. This was something that could destroy the entire fleet in one shot. "Time to firing?" Doyen asked. 90 seconds. Not enough time to destroy the hive conventionally. Not enough time to retreat to safe distance. There was only one option left. "All ships," Doyen broadcast. "This is Captain Doyen. The hive is preparing a final weapon. If it fires, we all die. So I am going to make sure it cannot fire." "Sir?" the tactical officer said nervously. "You heard me," Doyen said. He turned to his bridge crew. "I am going to ram the Indomitable into the hive's core. That should disrupt their weapon long enough for the strike teams to finish the job. All hands abandon ship. You have 60 seconds. The bridge erupted in protest. People refused to leave. They said they would stay with their captain. It was touching. It was brave. "It was stupid. That is an order," Doyen roared. "Get to the escape pods now. That is an order from your captain." "Go." They went. Slowly, reluctantly, but they went. The bridge emptied until only Doyen remained. He sat in his command chair and took manual control of the ship. "Indomitable to all ships," he said. "Thank you for the honor of serving with you. Take care of my crew. Tell my family I love them. And finish this fight." He aimed the Indomitable directly at the hive's glowing core and pushed the engines to maximum. The ship accelerated, burning through the last of its fuel. Scourge weapons hit the hull again and again, but it did not matter. Nothing mattered except reaching that core. On the other ships, crews watched in horror. Admiral Park tried to order Doyen to abort, but the communication channel was already closed. The Indomitable struck the hive's core like a spear through a heart. The impact released enough energy to briefly create a miniature star. The hive's weapon misfired, tearing the structure apart from the inside. Massive sections of the hive broke away and began to drift. But the hive was not dead yet. It was wounded, dying, but still dangerous. "Strike teams, go," Admiral Park ordered. "Finish it now." Dropships streaked toward the damaged hive. Marines in combat suits poured out, fighting their way through the dying structure. They moved through corridors that were collapsing. They breathed air that was toxic. They fought Scourge warriors that knew they were already dead and just wanted to take humans with them. It was brutal. It was ugly. But the humans kept pushing forward. Engineer Bayek Sora was with one of the strike teams. She carried demolition charges and a grim determination. They fought their way to one of the main neural centers, a vast chamber full of pulsing organic processors. "Plant the charges," she ordered. "Everything we have. I want this place erased." They worked quickly, placing explosive after explosive. The entire chamber was soon rigged to blow. As they prepared to evacuate, Sora looked around at the alien architecture. The Scourge had built something terrible here, something that had consumed entire civilizations, but they had made one mistake. They had threatened people while humans were watching. "Charges set," she reported. "Strike team evacuating." Detonation in 60 seconds, the teams ran. Behind them, explosions began to chain through the hive. The neural centers went dark. The biological system shut down. The great hive that had terrorized the galaxy for 500 years began its final death throes. Thexelar felt itself dying. Its thoughts became fragmented. Its memories scattered. In its last moments of consciousness, it sent one final message across the void. We were the apex. We were inevitable. How did we lose to one species? How did we lose to prey? The answer came from Dr. Nari, who had intercepted the message. She replied, knowing Thexelar would never hear it. We were never prey. We were always predators. You just did not recognize us because we learned to hide our teeth. The hive exploded. The blast was visible from the Velran homeworld, a new star briefly lighting up the sky. Debris scattered across the system. Scourge ships that had lost connection to the hive drifted aimlessly, no longer a threat. The battle was over. The Scourge were defeated, but the cost had been terrible. The human fleet hung in space like wounded predators, gathering strength for the next attack. Captain Han Doyen walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, inspecting the damage. Entire sections had been sealed off. The walls were scorched from fires. Blood stained the floors where medical teams had treated the wounded. But the ship was still flying. The crew was still fighting. That was all that mattered. "Captain on deck," someone called out as Doyen entered the engineering section. "As you were," he said quickly. The engineers barely looked up. They were too busy welding hull plates and rerouting power systems. Engineer Beck Sora stood in the middle of the chaos, shouting orders and gesturing wildly. "Sora," Doyen said. "Status report?" She turned to him, her face covered in grease and sweat. "We are held together by prayers and questionable decisions, sir. The port engine is running at 60%. The main reactor has a crack that should not exist according to physics, and someone seems to have fired the plasma cannon so many times that they melted. Can we fight?" Doyen asked. Sora grinned. "Of course we can fight. I just wanted you to know that we are one good hit away from becoming a very expensive firework." "That is what I like to hear," Doyen said. "What about the other ships?" "Similar status across the fleet. We have lost 23 vessels completely. Another 40 are too damaged to continue, but the rest are combat ready. More or less." She paused. "Sir, I have been running calculations. At this rate of attrition, we have maybe 2 more major engagements before the fleet is combat ineffective." Doyen nodded. He had known the math was bad. "Then we better make those engagements count. Is Dr. Nari ready with her surprise?" "She says yes," Sora replied. "Though she also says it is the most unethical weapon she has ever created, and she feels terrible about it." "Good," Doyen said. "That means it will probably work." In her laboratory, Dr. Kim Nari stared at the biological samples in front of her. They looked harmless, just tiny vials of cloudy liquid. But inside those vials was something that would have gotten her arrested on any civilized world. She had weaponized Earth. The liquid contained a cocktail of terrestrial bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Individually, each organism was common. You could find them in soil, water, or even the human body. But together, they were deadly to the scourge. Their biology had no defense against Earth's microbial warfare. "Dr. Nari," said her assistant, a young man named Lee Jinsu. "The delivery system is ready. We can deploy via missile warheads or atmospheric dispersal." "Both," Nari said quietly. "We use both. I want this in their ships, in their hive, in their very bodies. I want them to understand what happens when you threaten innocent people." Jinsu looked uncomfortable. "Doctor, are you certain about this? Once we release these organisms, we cannot control them. They will spread. They will mutate. We could be creating an extinction-level event for the scourge." "Yes," Nari said flatly. "That is exactly what I am creating. The scourge have consumed 47 civilizations. They have killed trillions. They will never stop unless we stop them permanently." She picked up one of the vials and held it to the light. "Earth taught us to survive by any means necessary. Sometimes that means becoming the thing that hunts the hunters. On the Velrin homeworld, millions watched the sky. They knew the human fleet was out there fighting for them. They knew people were dying to protect them. It was a debt that could never be repaid." Ambassador Rylith sat in a government building surrounded by planetary leaders. They were planning evacuation routes in case the humans failed. It was logical. It was prudent. But it felt like betrayal. "We should be helping them," Rylith said suddenly. "They are dying for us and we are planning to run." "What can we do?" asked the Prime Minister, her voice tired. "We are not warriors. We have no weapons that can harm the scourge. We are helpless." "Then we give them what we have," Rylith said. "Resources, fuel, medical supplies, information, anything they need." "They have not asked for anything," someone pointed out. "Because they do not expect anything," Rylith replied. "They came here knowing they might die. Knowing we had nothing to offer them, they came anyway. The least we can do is make sure they know they are not alone." The room fell silent. Then slowly, the leaders began to nod. In space, the human fleet began to move again. They formed up into a spearhead formation, with the Indomitable at the tip. Every ship had been repaired as much as possible. Every weapon had been reloaded. They were ready for the next phase. Admiral Park Jinwoo's face appeared on every ship's communication screen. He looked tired. They all looked tired. But his voice was steady. We have been fighting for 18 hours, he said. We have lost friends. We have lost ships. Some of you are wondering if this is worth it. If we should retreat and save ourselves. He paused. I cannot tell you what to do. Every captain has the authority to withdraw if they believe their ship is at risk. I will not force anyone to stay. The fleet held position. Nobody moved. But I will tell you what I see, the admiral continued. I see a species that reached out for help in their darkest hour. I see a galaxy that turned its back on them. And I see us, humanity, doing what we have always done, standing up when everyone else sits down, fighting when everyone else runs, being the crazy ones who answer the distress call even when it is stupid to do so. He smiled. We are Deathworlders. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived ourselves. And now we are going to show the Scourge what happens when predators meet prey. All ships, he said. Advance. The fleet moved forward. Not cautiously. Not carefully. They accelerated toward the Scourge hive at maximum speed, engines burning so hot that they left trails of ionized gas behind them. The Scourge saw them coming and launched everything they had. Thousands of fighters, hundreds of ships, biological weapons that could melt metal. The space between the human fleet and the hive became a wall of fire and death. The humans charged right through it. Lieutenant Cho Minho flew his Viper into the heart of the Scourge fighter swarm. He had been flying for 20 hours straight. His body screamed for rest. His eyes burned from staring at displays. But he kept flying. Because that was what you did. You kept going until the job was done or you were dead. Dragon Squadron, break and engage at will, he said over the channel. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, like it belonged to someone else. The squadron scattered. Each pilot picked their targets and attacked. Minho locked onto a Scourge fighter and fired. Miss. The enemy jinked at the last second. He fired again, hit. The Scourge fighter burst apart. Around him, space was full of combat. Human fighters weaved between Scourge ships, firing and dodging. Some pilots were hit and died. Others took damage but kept fighting. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was war. Dragon Lead, you have 3 on your tail, warned his wingman. Minho checked his rear display. 3 Scourge fighters were closing fast, firing those acid weapons. He pulled a maneuver that should have been impossible. His Viper spun on its axis and fired backwards while still moving forward. 2 of the pursuing fighters died. The 3rd kept coming. You are stubborn, Minho muttered. I can respect that. He cut his engines completely. The Viper slowed suddenly. The Scourge fighter overshot, finding itself in front of Minho instead of behind. He fired. The alien ship exploded. Scratch 3 more, he reported. Who else needs help? On the Indomitable, the Combat Information Center was pure controlled chaos. Screens showed hundreds of contacts. Officers shouted updates. Damage reports came in constantly. Captain Doyen stood in the middle of it all, making decisions that would save or doom thousands of lives. Scourge capital ships are forming a defensive perimeter around the hive, reported the tactical officer. They are overlapping their fire zones. We cannot get through. Yes, we can, Doyen said. We just need to make them move. Sora, how are those unstable plasma cannons doing? Still unstable, sir, came the engineer's voice over the intercom. I can give you maybe 3 shots before they overheat catastrophically. 1 shot is all I need, Doyen said. Target the largest capital ship. Full power. I want a hole we can fly through. The Indomitable's main cannons began to charge. Power was rerouted from life support, from shields, from everything that was not essential. The ship's lights dimmed. The temperature dropped. Every crew member felt the deck vibrate beneath their feet. Cannons at maximum, Sora reported. I really hope you know what you are doing, sir. So do I, Doyen admitted. The Indomitable fired. The plasma bolt that emerged from the cannons was so hot it distorted space around it. It crossed the distance to the Scourge capital ship in seconds. When it hit, the entire vessel simply evaporated. One moment it was there. The next it was just expanding gas and debris. The other Scourge ships recoiled in shock. Their defensive perimeter had a hole in it now. A hole just big enough for a fleet to charge through. All ships, Doyen said calmly. Follow us in. Dr. Nari, prepare to deploy your surprise. The human fleet poured through the gap. They flew into the heart of the Scourge formation, firing at everything. Ships on both sides died. But the humans kept pushing forward. Always forward. Thexler watched from the hive and felt something it had never felt before. Fear. These creatures should not exist. They fought with tactics that were reckless and suicidal. The asteroid belt became a graveyard. Scourge ships burned and died by the dozens. Human vessels moved between the floating rocks like sharks in bloody water, hunting anything that moved. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and neither side showed signs of stopping. Captain Han Doyen gripped the arms of his command chair as the Indomitable shook from another impact. A scourge weapon had gotten through their shields, tearing a hole in the port armor. Alarms blared across the bridge, but the crew kept working. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. Damage control teams responding, reported the tactical officer. Hull breach sealed. We have lost 2 gun batteries on the port side. Redirect power to starboard weapons, Doyen ordered. And somebody turn off that alarm. I can barely think. The alarm shut off. The bridge became almost quiet except for the constant hum of the engines and the sharp commands being exchanged. Doyen studied the tactical display. They had destroyed nearly 100 scourge ships, but more kept coming. The hive was sending everything it had. Captain, we have a priority signal from Sergeant Yun Taiyang, said the communications officer. The boarding team has breached the scourge cruiser. Doyen felt a chill run down his spine. The boarding mission had been his idea. When conventional weapons proved slow against scourge vessels, he had suggested going inside and destroying them from within. Most of his officers had thought he was crazy. Ambassador Ryleth had actually fainted when he heard the plan. But Sergeant Yun had volunteered immediately. So had 60 other Marines. Inside the scourge cruiser, Yun Taiyang checked his weapon and tried not to think about the fact that he was standing inside a living ship. The walls around him pulsed like heart tissue. The floor was covered in something that looked like veins. The smell was horrible, like rotting meat mixed with chemicals. This is the worst place I have ever been, said Private Nam Hyejin over the squad channel. And I grew up in the Seoul underground cities. Stay focused, Yun replied. He consulted the scanner on his wrist. Dr. Nari had given them devices that could detect the Scourge's neural centers. The ship had 3 of them scattered throughout its structure. Destroy all 3 and the vessel would die. First neural center is 50 meters ahead, Yun said. Stay tight and watch your corners. We do not know what is waiting for us. They moved through the organic corridors in standard combat formation. Every Marine wore a sealed combat suit with its own air supply. The atmosphere inside the ship was toxic, filled with spores and biological agents that would kill most species in seconds. But human suits were designed to operate in the sulfur clouds of Venus. This was nothing. The first contact came without warning. A wall suddenly burst open and scourge warriors poured out. They were nightmare creatures, all claws and teeth and segmented bodies. They moved like insects, scuttling across the walls and ceiling. Yun's squad opened fire. The corridor filled with the sound of gunfire and screaming. Plasma bolts burned through scourge flesh. The warriors kept coming anyway, driven by instincts that did not understand retreat. One warrior got close to Private Nam. Its claws tore through her shoulder armor, drawing blood. She screamed in pain and rage, then shoved her rifle into the creature's face and fired. The warrior's head exploded in a spray of organic matter. You okay, Nam? Yun asked, still firing. I am pissed off, she replied, reloading her weapon. Does that count? The last warrior died. The corridor became quiet again except for the heavy breathing of the Marines and the strange sounds of the living ship. Medic, check Nam's wound, Yun ordered. Everyone else reload and prepare to move. We still have 2 more neural centers to destroy. On the Indomitable, Dr. Kim Nari watched the biological readouts from the scourge ships. She had been studying them for hours, looking for weaknesses. What she found both fascinated and horrified her. Captain, she said, I think I understand how the scourge spread so effectively. They release biological agents that suppress immune responses in other species. It is incredibly sophisticated. It targets specific genetic markers common to most galactic life. Can we counter it? Doyen asked. We already have, Nari said with a grim smile. Humans evolved on Earth, remember? We have one of the most aggressive immune systems in the known galaxy. We had to, just to survive all the diseases on our homeworld. The scourge agents are completely ineffective against us. She pulled up a holographic display showing microscopic images. In fact, I collected samples from the scourge spores that hit our ships. I have been running tests. Our normal gut bacteria is toxic to them, just regular human bacteria that lives in our digestive system. Doyen stared at her. Are you saying we can weaponize our own germs? I am saying we already are weapons, Nari replied. We just never realized it. The Scourge evolved to consume life from peaceful, stable worlds. They have never encountered life from a death world before. They have no defense against it. Can you scale it up? Doyen asked. Already working on it, Nari said. Give me 6 hours and I can create a biological weapon that will make the Scourge think twice about ever leaving their home system again. Back inside the Scourge cruiser, Yoon's team had reached the second neural center. It was a massive chamber filled with pulsing organic machinery. Strange lights flickered across surfaces that looked like a combination of brain tissue and computer circuits. Plant the charges, Yoon ordered. 45-second fuses. We do not want to be here when they blow. His Marines moved quickly, placing explosive charges around the chamber. They had done this once already. They knew the drill. But Yoon could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. It had been too easy. The Scourge had barely defended this location. Then he understood. It was a trap. Fall back, he shouted. Everyone out now! The walls exploded. Scourge warriors poured in from every direction. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They had been waiting in hidden chambers, letting the humans get deep inside before springing the ambush. The Marines ran. They fired as they moved, cutting down warriors left and right. But more kept coming. Always more. Private Nam went down. A warrior's claw had torn through her leg. She fell, screaming. 2 other Marines grabbed her and dragged her along, still firing one-handed. Charges detonating in 20 seconds. Someone shouted. They were not going to make it. Yoon knew it with cold certainty. The door was too far. There were too many warriors. So he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Everyone through the door, he ordered. I will hold them here. Sergeant, no! Private Nam cried out. But Yoon was already moving. He stepped into the center of the corridor and opened fire with everything he had. His rifle spat plasma bolts in a continuous stream. Warriors fell and died, but more climbed over their bodies. His squad made it through the door. They sealed it behind them. Through his helmet camera, they could see Yoon still fighting. He had switched to his sidearm. He was down on one knee, but he was still firing. Charges detonating in 5, 4, 3. The camera feed went white, then black. On the Indomitable, the bridge crew watched in silence as Sergeant Yoon's biosigns flatlined. Captain Doyen closed his eyes for a moment. Another name to add to the list. Another family to notify. But the mission had succeeded. The Scourge cruiser began to break apart. Its neural centers were destroyed. Without them, the biological systems shut down. The ship became nothing more than dead meat floating in space. All boarding teams return to your ships, Doyen ordered. We have proven it can be done. Now we do it to the rest of them. Lieutenant Cho Minho was still flying his Viper through the battle when he heard about Sergeant Yoon. He had known the man. They had trained together. They had shared drinks in the crew mess. Now he was gone. Minho felt cold fury settle into his bones. He locked onto a Scourge fighter and fired. It exploded. He found another. And another. His wingman flew beside him, matching his aggression. Dragon Lead, you need to throttle back, his second-in-command said. Your heart rate is through the roof. I am fine, Minho said. He was not fine. None of them were fine. But they were going to finish this fight anyway. The battle raged for 12 more hours. The human fleet lost 23 ships. Over 2,000 crew members died. But they destroyed nearly 400 Scourge vessels. The asteroid belt became so full of debris that navigation was almost impossible. Finally, as Earth's sun rose over the horizon of the Velrin homeworld, the Scourge began to retreat. They pulled back toward their hive ship, regrouping. It was the first time in 500 years that the Scourge had retreated from anyone. Ambassador Rylith stood on the observation deck of the defense station, watching the human ships hold position. They were battered. They were damaged. They had bled. But they had not broken. Impossible, he whispered. They should not have survived. The station commander nodded slowly. They are from a death world. Perhaps that is what it takes to fight monsters. You need to be a little bit monstrous yourself. Rylith thought about Sergeant Yoon, who had sacrificed himself to save his squad. He thought about the pilots who flew into enemy fire without hesitation. He thought about Captain Doyen, who had never once considered retreat. These were not monsters, he realized. These were heroes. Terrifying, violent, impossible heroes. But heroes nonetheless, and they were not done fighting. The human fleet exploded out of hyperspace at the edge of Velrin territory. Every ship came in hot, their engines burning at maximum output. They did not slow down gradually like normal vessels. They simply flipped around and fired their engines in the opposite direction, pulling what the galaxy called a suicide burn. Ambassador Rylith watched from the observation deck of the Velrin Defense Station. His medical team had given him stimulants to stay conscious. The G-forces from those maneuvers should have killed everyone aboard those human ships, yet they kept coming, racing toward the inner system at speeds that made his head hurt. "By the Makers," whispered the station commander beside him. "They fly like they are trying to die." But they were not dying. They were dancing. The human ships moved in formations that looked chaotic but somehow worked. They wove between each other with mere meters of clearance. They accelerated and decelerated at rates that should have torn their hulls apart. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Velrin Defense Command, this is Captain Han Doyun of the UES Indomitable," a voice said over the communications channel. "We have arrived as promised. Please transmit all tactical data on Scourge positions and movements." The station commander fumbled with his controls. He had not expected the humans to arrive so quickly. Or at all, really. "Captain Doyen, we are transmitting data now. But I must warn you. The Scourge forward elements are already in the asteroid belt. They outnumber your fleet 3-1. There was a pause. Then Captain Doyen replied, and Rylith could hear the smile in his voice. "Only 3-1? We were expecting worse." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Doyen studied the tactical display. Red icons showed Scourge positions throughout the system. They were spreading like an infection, consuming everything in their path. The main hive ship lurked at the system's edge, a massive structure that dwarfed even the largest human carriers. "Well," said Lieutenant Cho Minho from his station, "they certainly brought everyone to the party." "Analysis, Dr. Nari?" Doyen asked. The scientist pulled up close-range scans of the Scourge vessels. "They are exactly as described. Biological ships with mechanical components. I am reading multiple redundant systems. If we damage one section, another will compensate. Conventional weapons will have limited effectiveness." "Then we use unconventional weapons," Doyen said. "Sora, what have you cooked up for us?" Engineer Beck Sora practically bounced in her seat. She had been working non-stop since they left Earth. "Remember how the Council said our plasma cannons were too hot and unstable? How they violated 17 different safety protocols?" "I remember," Doyen said. "Well, I made them hotter and more unstable. They will burn through organic matter like it is tissue paper. Of course, they might also explode if we fire them too rapidly, but that is a problem for later." "I love your optimism," Doyen said. "All ships prepare for combat. Fighter squadrons, launch when ready." From every carrier in the fleet, small craft began streaming out. They were called Vipers, single-seat fighters that most galactic species considered death traps. They had minimal armor, exposed engines, and enough acceleration to turn a pilot's brain into liquid. But they were fast. So fast that targeting systems struggled to track them. Lieutenant Cho Minho was one of the first out. He sat in his Viper's cockpit, feeling the familiar pressure of the acceleration couch against his back. His hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. He had been flying since he was 16, training in Earth's atmosphere where one mistake meant death. Space was actually easier. "Dragon Squadron, form up on me," he said over the squadron channel. "We are going to sweep the asteroid belt and see what these things can do." "Copy that, Dragon Lead," came the replies from his 11 wingmen. They fell into formation, moving like a school of fish. No rigid patterns, no predictable movements, just pure instinct and years of training. The Scourge fighters met them halfway. They were ugly things, all teeth and claws and biological weapons. They moved in swarms, trying to overwhelm through sheer numbers. It was a tactic that had worked against every other species, but humans had been dealing with swarm tactics for thousands of years. Locusts, ants, bees. Earth had taught them well. "Break and attack," Minho shouted. The squadron scattered. Vipers spun and rolled, each pilot choosing their own targets. Minho locked onto a Scourge fighter and fired. His plasma cannons lit up the darkness, cutting through the biological armor like it was paper. The Scourge fighter exploded in a spray of organic matter. "Scratch one," Minho called out. He was already moving, rolling his fighter to avoid return fire. A Scourge weapon spat acid that would have dissolved his canopy, but he was not there anymore. He was behind them, firing again. Around him, his squadron was doing the same. They flew in ways that made no sense to an outside observer. They pulled turns that should have knocked them unconscious. They endured G-forces that should have killed them. But humans had evolved on a planet with slightly higher gravity than most worlds. Their bodies were built for this. On the Indomitable, Captain Doyen watched the fighter battle unfold. The tactical display showed Dragon Squadron cutting through Scourge forces like a hot knife through butter. But more were coming. Always more. "Captain, I am picking up weapons fire from the Scourge capital ships," said the sensor officer. "They are launching some kind of biological projectiles." Doyen zoomed in on the display. Massive pods were being shot toward the human fleet. Each one was the size of a small house, and sensors showed they were full of organic material. "Spores," Dr. Nari said, her voice tight. "They are trying to infect our ships. If those pods make contact, they will begin consuming the hull from the outside." "Point defense engage," Doyen ordered. The Indomitable's automated weapons came online. Hundreds of small railguns began tracking the incoming pods. They fired streams of metal slugs at relativistic speeds, turning each pod into a cloud of vapor before it could get close. But one got through. It slammed into a destroyer's hull and began to spread. Organic tendrils started eating through the armor plating. "Engineering teams initiate emergency protocol 7, Doyen said calmly. On the destroyer, the crew acted quickly. They sealed off the infected section and vented it to space. Then they fired the emergency separation charges. The infected section of the hull broke away, tumbling into space. It was still spreading, still trying to consume. But now it had nothing to consume but vacuum. "Damage report?" Doyen asked. "We lost Section 7 and 8, came the reply. 17 crew members were in those sections when we vented. No survivors." The bridge fell silent for a moment. 17 people. 17 families who would get the worst news of their lives. But the alternative would have been losing the entire ship and all 300 crew members. "Mark their sacrifice," Doyen said quietly. "And make it count." The fleet pushed deeper into the system. More Scourge ships emerged from the asteroid belt. They came in waves, trying to surround the human vessels. It was a good strategy. Against any other fleet, it would have worked. But human ships did not fight like other ships. When they got surrounded, they did not try to break out. They turned and fought in all directions at once. Their weapons could track targets in a full sphere around them. Their engines could fire in any direction. They had been designed by people who grew up in three-dimensional environments, who understood that in space, there was no up or down. The Scourge began to realize they were not fighting prey. They were fighting predators. Thexelar, the Scourge Hive commander, watched from the safety of the hive ship. Its multiple brains processed the battle data with growing confusion. These new creatures should have been easy to defeat. Their ships were small. Their numbers were limited. Yet they fought with a ferocity that made no sense. The Scourge had conquered 47 star systems. They had consumed trillions of beings. None had fought like this. None had seemed to enjoy it. Thexelar sent new commands to the swarm. More ships, more weapons, more everything. The humans would be overwhelmed eventually. They had to be. On the Indomitable, Captain Doyen smiled as more Scourge ships appeared on the display. "Good. Let them come. Let them see what happened when you threatened innocent people while humans were watching. All ships," he broadcast, "close to knife fighting range. Let us show them what Deathworlders can do." The emergency beacon screamed across the darkness of space. It carried a message that made even the oldest members of the Galactic Council pause in fear. The Scourge had returned. Ambassador Rylith stood in the center of the council chamber, his forearms trembling. His people, the Velrin, were dying. Every day another colony went silent. Every hour the Scourge ships moved closer to his homeworld. He had come to beg for help, though he already knew what the answer would be. "We need military support immediately," Rylith said, his voice breaking. "My people have perhaps 2 standard months before the Scourge reach our homeworld. 6 billion souls will perish if we do not act now." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They were creatures of peace, having known no true war for 3,000 years. Their fleets were designed for exploration and ceremony, not combat. The Scourge, however, were designed for only one thing: consumption. "The matter requires careful consideration," said Counselor Voth, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish wrapped in silk. "We cannot simply rush our fleets into danger. There are protocols. There are procedures, Rylith wanted to scream. His children were on the homeworld. His mate worked in the capital city. Protocols would not save them, but he held his tongue and waited, because that was all he could do. The debate stretched for hours. Some argued for immediate action. Most argued for caution. A few suggested that perhaps the scourge could be negotiated with, despite 500 years of history proving otherwise. No one seemed ready to actually do anything. Then a new voice crackled over the communication system. It came from a species so new to the galactic community that most council members had to check their databases to remember who they were. "This is Admiral Park Jinwoo of the United Earth Space Navy," the voice said. "We have intercepted the distress call from the Velrin homeworld. We are preparing our fleet to render assistance. We will arrive in Velrin space in 42 standard hours." The council chamber fell silent. Then it erupted into chaos. "The humans?" someone shouted. "They have only had faster-than-light travel for 30 years. "Their ships are primitive," another voice called out. "They will be destroyed." "Recall them immediately," Councillor Voth demanded. "This is a council matter. Earth has no authority to deploy military forces without our approval." But Admiral Park's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "With respect, Counselor, we never asked for permission. Someone sent a distress call. We are answering it. That is what we do." The communication channel closed. The humans were coming, whether the council liked it or not. Rylith felt something strange in his chest. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just desperation dressed up as hope. Everyone knew about Earth. It had been discovered only recently during a standard survey mission. The survey team had classified it as a Class 12 death world, the highest possible rating. They said nothing should have evolved to sentience there. The planet was a nightmare of extreme weather, dangerous predators, and deadly diseases. Yet humans had not just survived Earth, they had conquered it. On the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Captain Han Doyen watched his crew prepare for hyperspace jump. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons systems and engine readings. Most of them were young. The oldest was barely 40. Humanity had only been in space for a generation, but they had learned fast. "All ships report ready, Captain," said Lieutenant Cho Minho from the navigation station. "The fleet is awaiting your command." Doyen looked at the tactical display. 347 ships hung in space around Earth. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, even civilian cargo ships that had been hastily fitted with weapons and armor. It was not the largest fleet in the galaxy, but it was the fastest assembled force in human history. "Do we have any intel on what we are facing?" Doyen asked. Dr. Kim Nari pulled up holographic displays showing grainy images of scourge vessels. The scourge are a parasitic species. They consume entire biospheres and use the organic matter to build more ships. Their vessels are part machine, part living tissue. They are extremely difficult to kill because they can repair damage almost instantly. "Weaknesses?" Doyen asked. "Unknown," Nari admitted. "No one has ever studied them up close and survived to report back. The Galactic Council has been avoiding them for centuries." Doyen nodded slowly. It was not the first time humanity had faced an unknown enemy. His grandfather had fought in the resource wars on Earth. His father had been part of the Mars terraforming project when the collapse happened. The Doyen family knew about facing impossible odds. "And what does the Council think about us going?" he asked. "They think we are insane," said Engineer Beck Sora from her station. She was grinning. "They have been sending us messages for the past 3 hours telling us to stand down. They say our ships are too fragile. They say our weapons are too weak. They say we have no idea what we are doing. Are they wrong?" Doyen asked. Sora's grin widened. "Probably not. But when has that ever stopped us?" Laughter rippled through the bridge. It was dark humor, the kind that soldiers had shared for thousands of years. They knew they might be flying to their deaths. They were going anyway. "All ships, this is Captain Doyen," he said, broadcasting to the entire fleet. "We are about to jump into a war zone to help people we have never met, to fight an enemy we know nothing about. The Council thinks we are fools. They might be right. But there are 6 billion people who are going to die if nobody helps them, so we are going to help them. Not because it is smart, not because it is safe, but because it is right." He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. They were scared. They were nervous. But they were also ready. "Humanity has always answered the call," Doyen continued. "Whether it was pulling someone from a burning building, or sailing across an ocean to help strangers in need. We answer the call. That is who we are. That is who we have always been. And I will be damned if we stop now. All ships, he said quietly. Jump. 347 ships vanished from Earth orbit in a flash of light. They left behind a planet that held its breath, waiting to see if their children would come home. In the council chamber, Rylith watched the sensor display showing the human fleet's departure. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that his people might survive. The humans were coming. These strange, violent, impossible creatures from their nightmare world were coming to help. He did not know if they would be enough, but they were all he had.